Kash Patel, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me here in Tennessee. I appreciate it.
It's an honor to have you here, and you're welcome. So, Brad Geary linked us up with the whole debacle that he's going through right now, and so, man, I've just been diving into everything that you're doing, and love what you're putting out, and I'm thankful that you're here. So thank you for coming.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks for giving Brad a big podium. We need to back guys like that and so many others. So it's great to be here, and happy to go over where you want to go.
All right. Well, everybody starts off with an introduction here. So Kash Patel, you served multiple senior roles in government. Most recently is the Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense, Deputy Assistant to the President on National Security Council, and Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration. At NSC, you oversaw the execution of several of President Trump's top priorities, including eliminating Al-Qa'ida and ISIS senior leadership and safely saving dozens of American hostages. Before joining the NCS, you served as National Security Advisor and Senior Counsel for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You previously served as a national security prosecutor at Department of Justice under the Obama administration, where you oversaw the successful prosecution of criminals aligned with Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other terror groups. You served as the DOJ Liaison Officer to Joint Special Operations Command. I'm guessing that's where you met Geary.
That's right. That's where I learned everything.
Since leaving government service, you have authored critically acclaimed books, most recently Government Gangsters, and authored 2 children's books. You're the founder and president of the Kash Foundation, a 501c3 that raises money for legal defense matters, education programs, tuition assistance, and financial assistance for our active duty military and veterans. You currently sit on the board of Trump Media Technology Group, host of Kash's Corner on Epoch TV, and you are a senior advisor to President Trump. You also serve as the senior fellow for national security and intelligence at the Center for Renewing America. I can breathe again. Quite the resume there. Am I missing anything that?
It's embarrassing to have that read to you. I hate when people do it, but I appreciate all the subjects and places I was able to go in a very unplanned route. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a hell of a journey, to say the least.
It's been a ride.
And what seems to be, I mean, what a fast-paced career. Wow. But so I kind of want to break this interview up into a couple of different sections. First, I kind of want to talk about, because you were so deep in intelligence, I'd like to talk about, what you think some of the top threats and or priorities that the U.S. should be looking at from a geopolitical standpoint on a world scale. And then I'd like to transition into what are we facing inside the U.S.? I mean, we're in some very interesting times. We have been for about the past at least 8-9 years.
Yeah.
And the media cycles just keep getting weirder and weirder. So, to say the least. So I wanna pick your brain on what we're facing here at home, because everybody knows we're facing something.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the deep state, you seem to be one of the most knowledgeable figures out there. So.
Yeah, we'll kick it off. I guess you want to start with external OCONUS and then work our way back in, or?
Yeah, we'll start with external, but first, I have a subscription account over on Patreon. There are top supporters that've been here since the beginning. They were super excited when they heard that you were coming on, and we got a whole slew of questions.
All right, let's do it.
That's one of the things I do is I give them the opportunity to ask each guest a question. So I got 2 questions for you. This one's from Kevin Stoltz. He wants to know if you're going to be the next attorney general if Trump gets into office.
It's humbling to ever be considered for any government position because, like you, we did the job as a service to the American people. That's what we signed up for. None of the media exposure or any of that stuff we ever cared about. And so for me, I told President Trump, the same thing when he decided he was going to run again. I said, I'm all in to help you win, whatever it takes. I'm your guy. And on November 5th, should he win, hopefully he wins, and he wants to have that conversation, it's up to him. He's the president, he's the commander in chief, and he gets to arrange the deck chairs as he wants. But for him, I'd go back in.
Do you think that's where you would be best utilized?
I don't know. I mean, that's like an impossible question. I have no idea where that sequencing is going to land. And it also depends on all the other folks that are surrounding the president and the team he goes in with. So, whether it's an intel position or something in defense or whatever, who knows? It's the one thing I've learned about these senior leadership positions, being around so many of them, is you don't have to be the subject matter expert of that institution to run it effectively. You almost don't want to have that leadership there because they're too tied into the everyday operations. And then what they do is they micromanage everything. You need to have someone who is familiar and has operated with it, but also at the same time who's managed a big ship and can understand the most important thing that Trump taught me was execute the mission and then get the hell out of the way for the people who signed up to do the job. And so that's the thing I learned. So if I go back and he wants me back and wherever he wants me, I'll tell your viewers as soon as he makes that decision, if he does.
Right on. When do people generally find out if they're going to be in the cabinet or on the staff?
The funny thing about my career is I guess I'm in politics, but like I never was, right? And then I got out and people are like, you're in politics. I'm like, well, I've never run for office. I'm never going to run for office. I'm not in the RNC, the DNC, or whatever party, this, that, or the other things, apparatus. But I guess just because of the close positions I've held with the president and continuing to serve, I've learned that whatever or however it was done is not Donald Trump's way. So I think that's what's appealing to him, to the American public about him. And so I don't know when he's going to stack it. Even though I know him as well as I do, and I talk to him all the time, he probably has his cabinet laid out in his mind. He's just not going to tell people. And he's going to do what he does, which is continue to ask probably everyone he sees about their opinions, and he might change his decision on it. So the vice president's probably best example. That came down to the last second, the last day, last wire.
Yeah.
There's a couple of folks in contention, but he made the decision, after hearing everything from everyone.
No kidding. So, I mean, I'm just curious, how do you feel about that? I mean, there's no time to switch gears in your head.
None.
Right?
Yeah. So
you just, hey, we're going to have you for X, Y, and Z, and we're starting yesterday. So, or is there somewhat of a, hey, we're looking at you, to fill this slot and start getting your mind right?
Yeah, there's some leeway for everybody. So what the campaign does, and that's whatever they manage over there, is they send out vetting packages to, I think it was like 8 people for President Trump's vice president candidate. So they knew they were being looked at. They had to submit this massive amount of information. The campaign leadership with the president looks at it, and then they make a decision. So the guys and gals they're on notice for at least a month that this could be your deal. And I don't know the inner workings on the VP thing. That's probably just like anything else. People are lobbying for you. You may be lobbying directly. You may be doing media. You may be on the road with the president. I mean, a lot of these folks were at President Trump's rallies. A lot of them were doing surrogate work for him. So I guess, in my opinion, I think he did it the best way possible. He auditioned them in front of the American public. There was no sleeper candidate. It's not like anyone in the top 3 or 4 or 5 was someone people hadn't heard of. They were all over the country with President Trump. They were doing TV interviews. They were very vocal and very public. And so I think the president was able to say, I have a wide range of opinions coming at me for these folks, and he was able to use that info.
Interesting. Next question is from Paul. I think this is something on everybody's mind. How likely is it that illegal immigrants will become undocumented voters?
It's probably already happening. I mean, whatever you think the number is, it's at least 10 million, if not 15 million, right? And you've seen liberal states go out and say, we're going to house illegal immigrants, we're going to give them IDs, and we're going to help finance whatever needs they might have for their families and themselves. And so you got to ask yourself, what's the point of all that? Like, what are you bringing all these people here for? Putting aside the fact that some of them commit the most atrocious crimes we've seen in modern history. What is the point of that from the Democrats? And it's because, this is the weapon I think they're going to use. They've studied this for a while. They know President Trump, in my opinion, has the best policy, the best agenda. And he's literally a president of people, from Hulk Hogan to Dana White to rock stars to movie stars to everyday Americans, the military, and to people that serve in government. They just love his style of leadership. And so I think the Democrats are smart enough to say, well, we got to figure out a new way to rig the election. They caught us on 51 Intel letter. They caught us on Russiagate. So now I think what you'll see is some of these swing states come in, and that's what people don't realize. It's not the federal government that controls federal elections. It's a state government. Every state applies its own laws. In my home state of Nevada, there's no voter ID. I went to vote, and I broke out my ID, and they go, we don't need that. I'm like, how do you know it's me? Also, not to mention the fact that you sent me 2 mail-in ballots. And so I could vote 3 times. And the system is not secure. And say you have 5% of the illegals, and say, let's use a conservative number of 10 million, right? 500,000 people. The last 2 elections were decided by 54,000 votes in 4 states. You don't need a lot. And that's the scary part.
Wow. So, I mean, at this point, this may be a stupid question, but if you got 2 mail-in ballots and nobody's checking your ID, I mean, is it even illegal to vote more than once these days?
It's supposed to be, but there has never been a process to question, the state-by-state electioneering methods and rules and laws. We had the, what was that famous Bush v. Gore, the paper ballot, I forget what you call it, issue, and then it went to the Supreme Court. But that was one state in one election. And so, I don't know how you get people to enforce those rules, because it's up to the state Secretary of State and the state Attorney General. Are we going to look at it or are we not going to look at it? Well, they're not going to look at it in Michigan or Minnesota. They're not going to look at it in Pennsylvania. They're not going to look at it in Georgia. Georgia's been very public saying we're not going to look at any of this. And so if your elected officials aren't going to look at it, what's your alternative?
So there's legitimately nothing stopping somebody in Nevada from just voting and going to the back of the line, and voting and going to the back of the line, and voting and going to the back of the line, is there?
So the one last measure that people have is bringing private suits, civil suits in the states. So, for instance, in Nevada, we are bringing multiple lawsuits to purge the voting rolls, right? So people think, I'm not the election expert. I can't talk to you about machines or whatever. It's not my wheelhouse. But before all of that are ballots. And before all of that is who gets a ballot? Who gets one mailed to you from Carson City for us, right, from Reno? Everybody that's on the voting scrolls. Okay, well, let's take all the dead people off. Let's make sure all the illegals aren't on. So if you eliminate the problem before it even starts by going to state court and federal court, and cleansing the ballot scrolls, then they don't get a ballot to get in line and do it all over and over again. So that's what we're doing there. And there's a couple other states doing that. I know they're doing that in Arizona, Wisconsin, and probably 1 or 2 other states. And there's really 5 states at play at the end of the day for this thing. 5 states are going to make this election.
What 5 states?
Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, maybe Georgia. But that's it.
Wow. 1 in 5 of us has learn a new language on our bucket list. Not sure what's up with the other 4, but if you're that one, make this your year to finally learn a new language with Babbel. Wasting hundreds of dollars on private tutors is the old school way of learning a new language. Babbel's 10-minute lessons are quick and handcrafted by over 200 language experts, ready to get you talking your new language in 3 weeks. Because talking is the key to really knowing any language, many of you know I recently traveled to Austria for an interview. Babbel was perfect for learning basic phrases and words I needed to get around. Getting up to speed fast made my trip stress-free, and I'll be using Babbel's speech recognition technology to help perfect my pronunciation and accent for the next one. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off Babbel subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/SRS. Get up to 60% off babbel.com/SRS, spelled BABBEL.com/SRS. Rules and restrictions may apply. Visit babbel.com for terms and details. Well, you might want to think about taking some of that cash and try to protect your purchasing power with precious metals like gold and silver. It's simple. Go to SeanLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD. You'll learn about top-rated precious metals company Goldco and how they can help you. They're a top-rated company with over 6,000 five-star reviews, tons of awards, and they support this show. And for my listeners, you can get up to a 10% instant match and bonus silver on qualified orders. So if you're worried about your money losing value, or you just want to buy some precious metals that you can physically hold on to, something that's real and been around for thousands of years, Goldco can help. So go to SeanLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD. That's 855-936-GOLD. Performance may vary. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making an investment decision. Join me and my special guest for the next behind-the-scenes experience exclusively available on Vigilance Elite Patreon. The behind-the-scenes footage is raw and uncut. This is as close to the set as you can possibly get. You can expect anything from off-topic conversations, studio tours, the final moments before the interview starts, and everything in between. The behind-the-scenes content is constantly evolving and will continue to bring you more as we grow. You can gain access for just $15 a month exclusively at Vigilance Elite Patreon. So is there any headway in Nevada?
Yeah, we're doing it's actually going really well. We're finding people who shouldn't be on the scrolls, and the courts have to say, okay, get these guys off. And so the issue for, again, all these states have different rules. And I think 2 states have early voting that starts 60 to 75 days ahead of November 5th, right? So you got to get in on the action before then. Some states have 30 and 60-day early voting, meaning ballots start going out that early. So you have to clean the scrolls by then. So hopefully some of these initiatives pay off by then. It's paying off in Nevada, and the work that Nevada GOP is doing is pretty incredible on it.
That's good to hear. You know, I want to move in because of all your time and intelligence. I definitely want to talk about some of the external threats from the U.S. Or of the U.S. But since we're talking about courts and legal jargon, and that definitely is your wheelhouse.
I used to be, man. I'm a retired lawyer. I never want to do it again.
Well, what I want to talk about is the two-tiered justice system. Everybody talks about it. And I think everybody knows, something's going on, but I'd love to hear you describe what the two-tier justice system is and just go into some detail about it.
In short, the two-tier system of justice is the deep state's weapon of choice. And I don't mean just in court. I mean in the administrative state too, in all 3 branches of the federal government, and in applications at the state level. So I used to be, before I started doing everything, I was a public defender for years. I defended the worst humanity had to offer, including terrorists. And the one thing I learned in that job was, our due process and our Constitution applies to everyone, or it doesn't work. And that's exactly what our founding fathers wanted. So I actually went in there and I was like, give me the worst of the worst. It was funny and ironic because all these liberals became public defenders. I became a public defender because I thought going to court was fun and litigating and investigating was cool. And these people would come in and my colleagues would be like, I don't want that case. I don't want that case. I don't want this case. I was like, we don't have a choice. You took this job because you're supposed to defend everybody. So the irony for me started there, but it wouldn't piece together till years later. And so meeting out that singular system of justice for everyone became a big part of my job. And then when I went forward through my career and when I got to DC and Main Justice and JSOC and all that, I would start seeing people in government, like places like the FBI and senior leadership positions in DOJ, making prosecutorial decisions based on a political election. You know, my first big instance of that was Benghazi. I was the main justice lead prosecutor for Benghazi for a while.
No kidding.
And I remember this meeting with then AG Holder, and we had a deck of like 19 guys we wanted to prosecute. JSOC had them rolled up, and we wanted to get them all. They killed 4 Americans, you know. It's a legit terrorist attack. And the basic general response from the FBI and DOJ leadership was, well, it's only politically convenient to get one guy. And they went and got basically the wrong guy. And then we prosecuted that wrong guy. Not that he wasn't a part of it. He just wasn't like the top tier of guys I would have gone after. And they screwed up the prosecution because they didn't listen to us and they didn't want to use the right evidence. And it was all political decisions.
What do you mean they didn't want to use the right evidence?
They wanted to, because half of that stuff was classified and they wanted to, I didn't piece this together then because we didn't have the whole fallout from Benghazi, the hearings and the congressional review. That would take time to come in. But they wouldn't let us prosecute, I think, 16 of the 19 that I wanted. They didn't want half this evidence declassified. And I was like,
who is they?
Well, the leadership at DOJ, FBI, and the intel community obviously played a role in that. And so, we were just like, all right, we'll do the best we can. And for example, Katala, Greenbrier River, the guy that first got prosecuted, he is getting out for his participation in Benghazi, where he killed 4 Americans. He'll be out of prison before the next presidential election's done.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Why would we? Why?
I mean, I don't mean to laugh at it because it's so atrocious because they charge him with the wrong crimes. Nobody at the FBI or DOJ wanted to listen to how to turn intel into evidence, into a public display in a court of law. Everybody working on the case thought they were the best at everything. And the decision from the top down is we're only doing this guy. And if you get the prosecution wrong, what
the fuck are we doing, man?
I don't know, bro.
What are we doing? Why are we even in? What the fuck are we doing?
It was my first kind of foray into it in terms of the 2-tier system of justice. And it wasn't happening outside, right? My first experience with that was public defender land. Now it's internal. Now it's the administrative application at the executive branch level in Washington, D.C. And, then you have Russiagate, and then you have all these other things we'll talk about. But the best, I guess, definition of the 2-tier system of justice I can come up with for your audience is the classified documents case.
Which one?
Which one? So let's use the 2 presidents, right? President Trump gets his home raided on a bogus WhatsApp warrant, which the FBI leaks to the media. Do you know whose name is in the FBI's WhatsApp warrant for President Trump that was 65% redacted? Trump's name and my name. Then they redacted everything else after my name, which once it finally came out, it was completely meaningless BS. Then they go in there and they stage that photo display and everybody's like, oh my God, look at all this classified materials. What they don't explain to the American public is he's a president, former president, Presidential Records Act. Bill Clinton did the same thing. Every president performs on the same thing. They can take what they want. That's the law. So you can't be prosecuted for possessing classified documents.
Well, can I add, and I don't know what was in the documents, but I mean, if you take, and I can't remember who I had this discussion with, it may have been Tim Parlatore, but
Yeah.
if you take, I mean, when people say classified documents, taking classified documents wherever, to Mar-a-Lago or Joe Biden's garage or wherever it was, I mean, a lot of those documents, people, they make it sound like it's the nuclear codes or but what it actually is, or at least what it sounds like to me, or what I've been told, is a lot of it is just the daily schedule.
Yeah.
Hey, today you're giving a press conference here, you're doing this here, or you've got lunch with so-and-so, you got a couple of meetings, and then that day's over and that is no longer classified because it's already happened. But obviously you can't get the president's schedule out before it happens because, am I correct in saying that some of these documents that they're saying are classified are that type of...
You're correct, but my point is, under the law, it doesn't matter if he had the nuclear codes.
Okay.
The Presidential Records Act, and Bill Clinton took literally recordings of a classified conversation and took them when he left the presidency, and he put them in his sock drawer. It's called the Clinton sock drawer case. No bullshit. They went to federal court, the government, and the federal court adjudicated that President Clinton, as a president, has the Presidential Records Act. He can take what he wants. The court never even found out what was on the recording. It's that strong. And that's the law. So then why does this DOJ come in and say, well, it doesn't kind of apply to Trump? And then you interview Joe Biden, and he was never president. He had 4 different locations of 20 years of classified information. Delaware, his offices in Washington, D.C., and 2 other locations, his beach house and somewhere else. But their excuse to not prosecute Joe Biden was, well, basically he's too inept. He's too feeble-minded, so we're not going to prosecute it. That's not, I've never heard that.
That's legitimately why they didn't prosecute
That's what
him?
the special counsel appointed to the investigation told Attorney General Garland, and Garland came out and literally said, well, we don't think Joe Biden meant to do it. And I was like, what? I was like, we're back to the Clinton case, the Clinton server case, right? It's like when Comey created this new legal fiction. No reasonable prosecutor, first of all, it's not the FBI's job to ever make a prosecutorial decision, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. I was in the National Security Division at the time. I was doing the discovery for Benghazi where we found her freaking email. And then they took that investigation away from us. And then it became the Clinton investigation, right? That everybody now knows about. I was like, who is this guy talking about? And then I didn't think it would happen, but it did. It came back full circle with the Biden administration, or the Biden prosecution of classified docs. And they let the guy off the hook. And they just said, doesn't matter. So we'll prosecute a guy who has a legal justification to have those documents because we don't care. It's Trump. And we won't prosecute the sitting president because you've made up a new legal standard that applies to exonerate him and to not even charge him. That is the 2-tier system of justice on steroids. And now you're talking about the 2 guys who are running against, now they're not, but 2 guys who were then running against each other for the presidency of the United States.
Where else is this happening?
Man. Everywhere. Unfortunately. So we saw it every day on people who are indigent and charged with serious offenses who were treated differently than folks who were, high-level private sector individuals. I mean, if you go to the fraud cases out of Wall Street or whatever, these guys get to go to Club Fed for, a couple years, 10 years, whatever. But the poor guy down at the end of the ladder, he's going away for 40.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a legal expert to have seen this over the years. And the classified documents case, that's just, you can apply what they did there out to what they're doing to certain Jan 6 defendants. And I always say this about Jan 6. Some people committed some pretty violent stuff. They need to go away. But when you're bringing in the 65-year-old grandmother who doesn't have any priors and she's held without bond for years to force pleas so that you can weaponize and politicize the 2-tier system of justice even further so that Christopher Wray, the FBI director, can go to Congress and lie and say domestic terrorism prosecutions are on the rise because they classified everything Jan 6 as domestic terrorism. And so that he can say, him and Merrick Garland can say, oh, we've got 1,000 people under investigation for this insurrection. Well, this insurrection that nobody was ever charged for. But it's a political narrative, and it's tough to defeat. It sounds pretty lethal, storming of this, hijacking of that, insurrection. But when you look at some of the people involved, their lives have been destroyed by the Justice Department because of a political vendetta they want to enact through the justice system to take out Trump.
How long has this been going on?
Decades. But it started slowly. I think Eisenhower was the first to say it in the 50s, and he started it with the defense industrial complex. He basically said, paraphrasing, if you don't control this animal, it is going to take over Washington, D.C., and is going to take over the purposes of the government's departments and agencies. And to me, there's probably no better example than the defense industrial complex. But once you layer that in, and you combine that in with what people in these leadership positions for so long have done, which is use Washington as a revolving door. I don't see it as a Republican or Democratic thing. I see it as a swamp thing. I see it as a who's running these agencies and departments, where do they go afterwards, and how do they get back in? And all of these people have connections, direct lines, of employments from the private sector to Washington and back to the same firms, the same lobbyists, the same defense and contractor or big agency. And it's been going on for decades. I think when Trump hit the escalator, these guys got on steroids because they didn't care that he was a Republican and the Republicans were to back him. They just didn't want him there to expose the corruption of the swamp, to expose the deep state. And you saw more Republicans in Trump's administration. For example, his Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, agreed to wear a wire because then Deputy Director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, supposedly another Republican, went to the number 2 cop in the country and said, I need you to wear a wire so we can get information to use the 25th Amendment against President Trump. It's kind of ironic now that we've seen Joe Biden and what the 25th is supposed to be used for and what these guys wanted to do to exact a political vendetta. Remember, Trump exposed, we exposed during Russiagate, Andy McCabe's criminal activity while running the FBI. We exposed Rod Rosenstein's criminal activity while signing an illegal FISA, burying evidence of innocence, and lying to a federal court just to surveil a sitting president of the United States. We caught him. And they will stop at no length to get him.
Let's go back. You said the 25th Amendment. What is the 25th Amendment?
So a long time ago, basically, Congress and the cabinet secretaries got together and said, what if something happens to a sitting president? Not an assassination, but just he has a stroke. He's completely in a coma. The worst of the worst, right? Then how do you govern? Because technically he's not dead, so there's no mechanism to kick in the vice president to president. So the 25th Amendment basically says the vice president combined with the cabinet goes to Congress and says, the president's incapacitated. Here's what happened. The VP then becomes the president.
Okay. So, well, I guess we're bypassing the O'Connor's threats for the time being, but
we gotta get back to it.
But hey, we're on a roll here. So let's get into the deep state because it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What is it?
It is an apolitical entity that operates in government to service itself instead of the American people. And what I mean by that is it's leadership positions across government, whether it's DOJ, FBI, DOD, CIA, whatever, combined with underlying positions that are pretty senior up, who work with mainstream media entities to perpetuate frauds on the American people, to commit government corruption, and to stay in power and to lie to the American people and to rob them of the truth. That is the singular purpose of the deep state, because they think once the truth gets out, their corruption is going to be exposed. They might get prosecuted for breaking the law. And once that happens, you have an explosion in D.C.
Well, I want to dig in a little bit more on who exactly is it. I mean, I think Vivek gives a great explanation of what it is, but I'm always curious to hear what everybody else thinks. But it just seems so well organized to me.
It is. Oh.
So who's at the end of it? Is it a country? Is it U.S. politicians? Is it the World Economic Forum? Like, where it's so well orchestrated, there has to be an organizer. And so who is the organizer?
I don't think that there's one specific organizer. I think there is a group of organizations that have participated in it for a while. The World Economic Forum is a piece of it. Certain politicians are a piece of it. Certain people who become AGs, directors of the FBI, directors of the CIA, et cetera, are a piece of it. And of course, the mainstream media is a big component of it. All of those entities partner up together to take over Washington, D.C. And instead of doing the job for the American people, they come out instead, come up with government boondoggles that pay themselves billions and billions of dollars, or their friends billions and billions of dollars, which is our dollars. And they want to make sure that that keeps going over and over and over again. I'll give you a perfect example. Who cares if you've ever followed Russiagate or any of this other stuff about the deep state? Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, and Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general then of the DOJ, were tasked with helping us at Congress, where I ran the Russiagate investigation, to expose Russiagate. We went to them and said, look, you guys didn't do this. Help us expose it. And they both doubled down. You know what they did? They launched an investigation against me, the senior congressional investigator for Russiagate on the House Intelligence Committee, and 6 other staffers. They used grand jury subpoenas to get my personal information, my banking information, my emails, my cell phone information, and everything else. I didn't find out till 5 years later when Google called me and said, hey, our 5-year notification has lapsed. We can now tell you the DOJ surveilled you. And we had to turn over documents. So that became that we exploded that into a federal lawsuit that's still ongoing in the DOJ and FBI. But those two guys.
Hold on. What? So Google informed you that you're being surveilled 5 years after the investigation started.
Right.
What I mean, what more did they tell you?
They're not allowed to say anything, but that you can be informed now since it's 5 years later. So as a former national security prosecutor, I know you don't just go to Google. You go to every provider. You go to all the telecoms. You go to the bank. You go to everybody. If you're going to run an investigation, that's what you do. But these two guys who were running the FBI and DOJ sat in a room with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and lied to our faces. They threatened to investigate us, which was bad enough, right? They actually did it. And then these two guys would get exposed, for Rod Rosenstein specifically, for signing a FISA that was totally bogus. And we've caught Chris Wray lying time and time again as the director of the FBI. Put these guys over here for a second. Gina Haspel, who was the director of the CIA, was London station chief in England when Russiagate kicked off. Under the rule of law in America, if you want the Federal Bureau of Investigation to launch an investigation overseas, you have to get permission from the head intel rep. In England, it's the the station chief. So she allowed Russiagate to occur on British soil, where there was a barroom operation to try to record some nub into spilling the beans on Donald Trump. And they would use that to launch the whole Russiagate offensive. Gina Haspel would later become Trump's CIA director. And then when these guys got out of the administration, do you know where Gina Haspel and Rod Rosenstein work today?
Where?
At Christopher Wray's old law firm as senior named partners, making 7 and 8 figures.
How is this going to get broken up? They seem so deep.
Yeah.
I mean, you just mentioned they're embedded in politics. They're embedded in mainstream media. They're embedded in intelligence agencies. They are former top leadership of the military that's now embedded within the military-industrial complex companies. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's how many people are involved in this?
Thousands.
In the deep state.
Thousands.
How would you even begin to dismantle it?
Well, I think the first Trump administration was the beachhead, right? People were just like, you guys are full of it. And we continued to put out the truth. And years later, people are catching up to a lot of that truth saying, wait a second, you guys weren't lying back then. People being the American public. That's the weapon we need. And you guys weren't lying about impeachment. They literally made up a piece of a phone call to launch a presidential impeachment and then put me in the middle of it by making up a meeting that never occurred. But it sounded dirty at the time. And then when we finally released the transcript, everybody was like, oh, yeah, there was no quid pro quo. Nothing illegal happened here. But the narrative had been out there. Now you have President Trump as a president who was impeached for the first time in however many years. And so they get their narratives, right? They don't necessarily care about the conclusory portion of their mission. They use the mainstream media to say Trump's a Russian asset. He's been impeached. Kash Patel is under DOJ surveillance for whatever investigation when he was never done. I've had more mainstream media hits on me than I can count. But they want the title narrative to carry the day. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation. They don't care about the actual truth. And so once you start stacking these together and you show the American public you were lied to, you based your vote at the polls on information that the government purposely withheld from you so that you would vote a particular way. Once you show enough Americans that, then I think you have the movement that you need behind the leadership that we have in Donald Trump, is my position, to take a wrecking ball to the deep state.
How so?
You go to D.C. and you remove all these positions, right? And you start enacting measures, not of retribution, but of legal consequence. Y'all acted one way. For instance, the people that signed the 51 Intel letter, right? Permanently suspend their security clearances forever. Every one of those guys lied. Every one of those guys got caught lying. You're talking about 2 former CIA directors, a former NSA director, and a former Secretary of Defense. All intentionally, to this day, continue to lie and won't take back their letter. Okay, you can stop making money from your security clearance. There's a start. Then you go in and you get the Eric Charmels of the world, who've been publicly outed as utilizing intel to inject a political narrative across mainstream America. And you remove these people from government. You have to go in there. The same thing we're talking about the voting, it's the same thing here. You got to cleanse the scrolls. Government service is a service. We're not making you do it. And if you break the rules and regulations, you're out. So that's a big part of it, right? Then you bring in the new bench, the new team. Then you're going to have to keep fighting the media. And I think we're slowly, over the years, have started to win that fight. Because the more and more, this is one thing I learned when I started Russiagate, my name was outed for the first time, that the media is attacking you, the more you're over the target.
Who is at the head of it?
I don't think there's one person or one group. I think it's people who know they're going to benefit from each other if they sign up for the program, let's call it, right? And so, again, not a Republican or Democrat thing. In the glossary of this book, in alphabetical order, I think there's like 65 people I name by title and name, just to show people how expansive the deep state is. And so there is no like one chain of command they report to. Instead, what I believe they do is they bring in people that they can control. Oh, the Obamas still have heavy sway in that entire operation. And so do people that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years in Washington.
I mean, I think it's already out there for them. I mean, how corrupt it is. I mean, that's why I think that's why podcasts are doing so well right now. And I mean, somebody just came in here in media and said that CNN's viewership is only about 50,000 at any particular point in time during the day. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
It's atrocious. And I'll give you an example from sort of the other end of the spectrum. When Tucker was on Fox, and this is not an attack on the reporting, it's just the way the pendulum has swung away from mainstream media in general. When Tucker was on Fox and he was at the peak of his show's viewership, he was still 1/3 less than Bill O'Reilly when Bill O'Reilly was on Fox in terms of viewership.
Wow.
So it had already started, and it's, again, not because of the reporting. I think it's because other people started to say, I don't want to watch mainstream media anymore, anywhere. And the shows, the podcasts, the radios, the series started becoming more and more and more and more popular. And then they finally ran into what you talked about, the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world, Washington Post and what have you, and people just said, I've had enough. But the problem is there's still a lot of people that subscribe to it out of sheer hatred for the other side. Mm-hmm. And they'll keep pumping out disinformation. And so our job, my job, is not to go, and this is what I learned from one of my former bosses and now my friend Devin Nunes. When one day I figured out who paid for the Steele dossier, right? I got the subpoenas, I got the bank records, I figured it out. And before we could tell the world, I figured out it was Hillary Clinton and the DNC. And I went to Devin and I told him that in the morning. He goes, dude, if you're going to start drinking at 9 a.m., get out of my office. Because it was, just think about that back then. That was an insane thing to conceive that a political party would be responsible for financing Russiagate, let alone having the deep state in government execute it. And so once I figured that out, I thought, okay, we're good. Investigation over. Everybody can move on. And Devin goes, dude, now we got to spend the next 4 years telling the American public this happened and fighting the media because they're going to come up with narratives to attack you, me, the investigation, Trump, and anything else. And he was right. And I go, okay, so how do we convince the other 45% of Americans? He goes, no, you're missing it. You need to convince the other 7%. You convince the other 7%, you win every election there ever will be. And it was what he was talking about. I don't have the political experience he had. He was talking about sheer politics, numbers, how you win elections, and the numbers you need. Because you're never going to get that opposing 40%. It's never going to come over to your way.
I don't understand how whoever owns the news organizations, they have to see their business crumbling.
They are.
And so I've yet to see any changes. I've yet to see anybody try to restore their trust in the viewers. It just seems to be, are they just going to ride this thing until the wheels fall off, or what's the plan here? Maybe.
You've seen some sea changes at the New York Times, and when they did that, there was like an internal revolt, and the sea changes kind of stopped. So the people, I think, in charge, they're not stupid. They see it. They notice it. You can't make up money not being there. Mm-hmm. You can't make up viewers who stop buying your paper. CNN did the same thing. Remember, they fired between a year ago and today, they fired every reporter that was on their mainstream networks, daytime, primetime shows. Every one. Then they fired their CEO. And there was another revolt. And kind of paused again. And, so I think people see it. They see that there needs to be a course correction. But they
can't do it, though.
They can't do it.
Just 2 weeks ago with the Trump assassination attempt, what was CNN's headline? It was Secret Service rushes Trump off the stage.
Yeah, I actually took a clip of that headline, so I never lost it. And it says, Trump falls.
Yeah.
That's what the CNN headline was when the guy got shot in the head.
So, I don't see any attempts to rectify the distrust.
I think you're ultimately right. I think my point was just some people see it internally, and when they try to rejigger it, they just get steamrolled.
So is this like a CEO being steamrolled by his employees?
Essentially. And then, look at what happens, over on MSNBC. They take Mika and Joe Scarborough off the air after the Trump assassination attempt because they don't want that program to say the false file disinformation that would have said had they had him on the very next day, right? But what happens the day after that? There's a revolt at MSNBC. And they come out swinging the next day. They were like, oh, we're sorry. We didn't let them on. They should have been on. And they go out and say all the false, terrible things that they were going to say because they hate Trump.
So is it the head of the news organizations that are part of the deep state, or is it the actual reporters?
I think the heads, in an ironic way, I think the heads of the news organizations report to their big shows, because those big shows carry their networks. And they have so much WASTA built up that they can, it's one of the only places I've ever seen where you can be like, oh, your CEO said X, I don't care. I'm doing what I want.
No kidding.
And for the most part, for the people that participate in disinformation campaigns over at CNN, over at MSNBC and wherever, ABC, CBS.
Pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere. That's why, well, there's more reasons than that, but that's one of the reasons why your show's so popular. You don't care about anything but the truth. It's the only thing I've really ever cared about. And I just didn't think it would be so hard in America to relay it.
Where do you see this ending with the media? You think they're going to go out?
They're not going out laying down.
Do you think they'll be subsidized by the government?
Well, NPR already is, right? And that's probably what they want to have happen next. That's probably what the CNNs of the world want, since they aren't making any money, since their viewership is cratering. And once, as you know, get a government subsidy like that, you can say whatever you want and be sponsored by the government. You know, NPR should be completely retooled, if not shut down until it's fixed, because we're paying for it.
I mean, I feel like that. I've thought this for a long time, that they were going to crash and burn on purpose. I've actually never vocalized this, because what we've seen in 2008, all the banks got bailed out.
Yeah.
Airlines all got bailed out.
Yeah.
Media organizations are all failing. They're all going to get bailed out.
Yeah.
I don't see why they wouldn't. They employ a metric shit ton of people. That seems to be why they bail people out. They don't want the job losses. And then once they get bailed out by the government, then guess what? You are 100%. I mean, not that they aren't already.
Yeah.
You know, but
I think there's one more layer to it. You're right about the money, the employment, the employees, and the attention they get. The one more layer of it is, how does that all benefit the people in Washington, D.C.? Insider trading. I mean, just look at Nancy Pelosi's insider trading deals. It is insider trading. And she keeps making up hundreds of millions of dollars. So do dozens of other congressmen and women.
Mm-hmm.
So they know what's going to happen. They're writing the legislation. They're doing the funding. And it's the same thing for the media circuit. These people, not all of them, but for the most part, live and breathe to get on these TV shows. I could care less if I'd ever do media again. In fact, I'd probably be a much happier guy. These guys are begging to get on your show for 3 minutes here and 4 minutes there. They're begging for relevance. And they're looking for any way they can get it. So if the government and those folks were to bail them out, well, they'd be on those programs on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And they'd be on your TV, and they'd be a national figure. They wouldn't do anything. They'd come up with the next corrupt plan to rob us of the truth and implement a system where we bend the knee to them.
Do you think it shouldn't have any government officials on?
No, I think they should just have people who care about questioning them neutrally. Again, not a Republican or Democrat thing. Like, if someone goes out there and specifically lies about Russiagate, about impeachment, about insurrection, about the 51 Intel letter, call them out on it. But they keep having them on over and over and over and over again. Remember, illegal immigration. It was not a national security crisis for the first year of the Biden administration, for the second year of the Biden administration, for the third year of the Biden administration. Now in the election year of the Biden administration, it's a national security crisis finally. Where Donald Trump was a Nazi for dealing with it as a national security crisis. Mm-hmm. And that allowed us to implement assets and tools from DOD and the intel community to specifically go after that crisis. But the media manufactured this disinformation campaign that nothing wrong at the border, nothing to see here. And now everyone knows that was a total hoax, a complete scam. And people in Congress went on their shows to double down on that narrative, to say what a great job Joe Biden and the border czar Kamala Harris are doing. And now we have more fentanyl on our streets, killing more kids than ever before in the U.S. We've got more rapists in our streets. We've got more murderers. We've got more heroin. We've got more cocaine. And we have more violent crimes. And what does Joe Biden go up and tell the world the other day from the Oval Office after he decided not to run for president? Border crossings are the lowest they've ever been in my presidency than ever before during Trump. And the media printed it.
I saw that. I did see that. That's, man. I mean, I when I read that stuff, I like to think everybody knows that's a lie, but I know, I know there's a good portion of this country that will read whatever that print is and take it as gospel.
But that's the power of your program. That's the power of your show. You don't have just the goobers in DC watching, right? You're so expansive, from military to sports to entertainment to Hollywood to everyday Americans that are so fed up with that garbage that they're actually getting educated. You know, that's why you have the guests you have. And I think that's part of the transformation process. And people always ask how you defeat the deep state. And I think you were asking earlier. I'm like, dude, it ain't happening overnight. Mm-hmm. Even if Trump wins, it ain't happening during his 4 years fully. Mm-hmm. They spent decades doing this. It's going to take a few terms to clean up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how do you get them out of government? How do you get the deep state out of government?
You deprive them of the opportunity to continue running the deep state, removing their security clearances. The other thing I recommended in my book, and I recommended to President Trump too, was you need a 24/7 declassification office, whatever you want to call it. Transparency, truth, whatever, I don't care. Sits in the White House, reports directly to you, and you take incoming from the United States of America. I want JFK. I want the 9/11 files. I want this. I want that. All the FBI, and this is a tool, this is something we didn't cover. What the deep state uses the most to cover up their corruption is an illegal application of the classification system. Remember the Lovebirds text from, this is a beauty, the Lovebirds text from FBI, DOJ land, Russiagate, Strzok and Page were texting each other. They were running the Russiagate investigation against Trump. They were the head of the counterintelligence unit at the FBI, and they're having an extramarital affair together. Can't make this stuff up. They're sending each other texts about how much they hate Trump and are going to create an insurance policy to stop Trump. Then we finally find those text messages. You know what the FBI and DOJ do for like a year? Redact them to congressional investigators and congressional men and women running the oversight of their agency. That's just one example. But it gets even better. Here's the deep state full circle. Just last week, do you know what Strzok and Page received from the Department of Justice?
What?
A $1.5 million payout to settle a lawsuit that Strzok and Page brought for the improper disclosure of their personal text messages on FBI phones. And the DOJ just rewarded them. They broke the law. They broke the chain of command. They broke every regulation there is in the FBI. They weaponized the system of justice against a political target they hated. We found those text messages, and we got them declassified finally in full when I became Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And the world has now seen them, and they can read them. And that's the best form of transparency. That's why I want this 24/7 declassification office. Don't have me regurgitate it to you. Read it. Get the documents, get the files, get the memos. But the deep state came full circle and gave these guys a payday for rigging a presidential election and breaking the law. So now you know what happens. That's step one. Step two, get America the truth. And that's what that office would be for.
If Trump gets in there, do you think anybody's going to be held accountable?
Yeah. And here's
the only way that the government ever gets confidence in the people again, and I don't think they even give a shit, by the way, but is to hold somebody accountable, hold people accountable for what we've been seeing go on. You're
totally right. The people that are running the deep state don't give a shit because they're so arrogant. They're like, we're never going to get caught. And if we get caught, we're going to get rewarded. Like these guys, like Andy McCabe, who the DOJ rewarded him with his pension after we caught him lying to the FBI investigators while he was the deputy director, leaking to the media improperly. He goes out, we fire him. He gets out of government. He brings a lawsuit, and the DOJ under Joe Biden reinstated his pension in full. So how do you have accountability of stuff like that? Or a Comey, or a Clapper, or Brennan? We haven't even talked about the intel side of stuff. My version of accountability is a little different than maybe what most people would think. I don't have a hit list. I don't have a revenge march I'm on. I want the Constitution.
You don't have a hit list?
I want the Constitution.
I'll give you one.
I'll take it. I simply want the Constitution to be applied to everybody, singularly, in government and outside of government. That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting closer to the edge of collapse. We see things falling apart around us, and this is just what we are being told in the mainstream media. Folks are fighting back and investing in emergency food storage, and you should too. We need to prepare for when the facade falls and we're left on our own. Get prepared at mypatriotsupply.com. With My Patriot Supply, the nation's largest emergency preparedness company, you'll be ready. Over the years, My Patriot Supply has helped over 3 million American families prepare for emergencies. My Patriot Supply also sells solar generators, biomass stoves, gravity-powered water filters, heirloom seeds, and critical survival gear. Each Ready Hour emergency food kit contains delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and sealed inside heavy-duty 4-layer packaging to last up to 25 years. You'll get over 2,000 calories every day. You're not ready if it's not Ready Hour Foods. Go to mypatriotsupply.com today. They ship fast. Order by 3 p.m. and your order will ship that same day in unmarked boxes. mypatriotsupply.com. From small family farms to your dining table, Moink gives you access to the freshest, sustainably sourced meat and fish, all while supporting American family farms. You can help save the family farm and get access to the highest quality meat on earth when you join the Moink movement today. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should, because the family farm does it better. You choose the meat delivered in every box, like ribeyes to chicken breasts to pork chops to salmon fillets and much more. Each box ships right to your door, and you can cancel at any time. Moink is helping support rural America, and I love that they're from small-town Missouri, just like I am. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/SRS right now, and listeners of this show get free hot rolls in your first box. They're the best hot rolls you'll ever taste, but for a limited time only, spelled Moink, M-O-I-N-K, box.com/SRS. That's moinkbox.com/SRS. How much do you think you're paying in subscriptions every month? The answer? Probably a lot more than you think. It's been reported that 74% of people have subscriptions they've forgotten about. I have so many subscriptions to run different parts of my business, it's easy to lose track. Thanks to Rocket Money, I'm no longer wasting my money on the ones I forgot about. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. With Rocket Money, I have full control over my subscriptions and a clear view of my expenses. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place, and if I see something I don't want, Rocket Money can help me cancel it with a few taps. I love how the dashboard shows me this month's spending compared to last month, so I can clearly see my spending habits. Plus, they can create a custom budget and help keep your spending on track. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is submit a picture of your bill and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Sean. That's rocketmoney.com/Sean. rocketmoney.com/Sean.
I want the judges to stop being political jackals on the bench and participate. We didn't even talk about it, and participate in the deep state prosecutions that have weaponized justice. And what I want in terms of full accountability is I want the American people to have enough ammunition of the truth that they are the ones that enact the accountability in Washington, D.C. That is how you see a sea change. I know the people that, guys like me, may take self-fulfillment in seeing that guy or that gal go to prison for breaking the law. But that is not going to fix Washington, D.C.
You don't think so?
Not alone.
You don't think that's an important piece of the puzzle here, is to hold these people accountable, prosecute them, imprison them, maybe more?
It's a piece of it.
And as an example to everybody that's coming after them, if you do this, we're coming for you, and this is what's going to happen.
I agree in full that it's a big piece of it. But it won't fix the next man up behind them unless you can combine that piece with educating America that this is going on writ large. Because you're not going to get everybody, right? But if you get enough Americans in there to get Congress to do what they should be doing, like prosecuting Merrick Garland for breaking a congressional subpoena and violating the law, he can send Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro to prison for violating a congressional subpoena, but he can do it on his own, right? What I want is for people to get Congress to execute the authority they have on instances like this and have him held accountable there. And then I want the DOJ and FBI to be run by the Constitution. I want the intel communities to focus on our overseas threats and our border. I want all of these people that join the ranks of government to respond to the needs of the American people. It might sound pie in the sky, but if you want to fix it, fix it. I give you 50 things to do in here, but if the American people aren't behind you, then you won't have the accountability you really want.
I mean, any of the stuff that we're seeing right now, the word treason is thrown out quite often. Is it actual treason?
For who? For
fill in the anything, any of the stuff that's going on.
I mean, I think what so many of these guys did, whether it's Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Barr, Haspel, Esper, what have you, I think there's a lot of rule and law breaking. And I don't know that it ever gets to the level of treason singularly with any of them. But what you have is a buildup of so many actions by the deep state that it becomes borderline treasonous to allow those people and their activities in a collective fashion to ever be applied to the United States.
What is the definition of treason?
It's going to stump me here on the law of it, but it's basically committing an overt act to overthrow your government is treason. So they're not committing overt acts to overthrow our government. What they're doing collectively is committing acts to rig our government and to stock it with people that they want in there, themselves and their acolytes.
What would be the harshest punishment you could see happening to some of these people?
Some of them being prosecuted. I mean, there's nothing harsher than that, right? Your civil liberties are taken away from you and you're sent to prison. It's about as harsh as it gets. We can do the financials. I think we need to do parallel track civil suits and prosecutions for monetary purposes against some of the big wigs in Wall Street and all that stuff that happens up in the financial racket. Insider trading stuff. There needs to be a multitude of things done, but I think the biggest punishment.
What about stuff like what was it, 51 intel agents?
Yeah. Strip their security clearances forever. Remember, every one of these people's in the private sector, and you know this, they use that to get 7- and 8-figure paydays, to get big government contracts, to go for big defense contracting and intelligence firms, right? Who owns their security clearance? The U.S. government. Who pays for it? The U.S. government. So the DNI can come in there on day one and said X, 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 all the way down the line. And they're not the only ones.
Do you think that will happen if Trump gets in? That seems like a very easy task. pull these clearances now. I've seen it happen. I've
did
seen
it.
it happen
Yeah,
at a lower level within the agency. Pull that guy's clearance.
Here's the one. Look, Trump speaks for Trump. I've recommended that to him. I can tell you that publicly and to your audience. I want him to do that because it's justified. It's not an act of vengeance. They have had the opportunity to recant, and all 51 of them have doubled down and tripled down. So pull him. I think he will, but it will be up to him and his DNI.
I mean, it is legitimately that simple, correct?
Yeah,
pull
not to mention the
clearance.
amount of money we'll save. And they're just one example of the 51, right? There's everybody that participated at the FBI in Russiagate. Everybody that participated in at DOJ in Russiagate. All these people have clearances. They all still have clearances. Gone. Same thing at CIA. Same thing at DOD. Same thing at NSA. I mean, the list will be massive. The 51 is just a very public-facing version of it.
What are some of the other ways we could get rid of them in your book?
I should know the short form of the book better. I'm failing on my chance to sell it. I think we've talked about like the bulk of the ones I want to do. Personnel. It's the one thing we haven't really discussed. Restocking. I don't consider it restocking. Everybody keeps talking about who's got the black book. You got to go in and fill 4,000 jobs. Why? Who the hell said you have to have 4,000 people come in with you? Why can't it be 1,000? No one's ever given me a good answer for that. Except that's the way we do things. That's the way we do transitions. That's the way the deep state works. Okay, well, that's not really a good answer. And then, if you decrease the amount of people in the cog, you've preempted
the cog? What's cog
the
stand
wheel,
for? Okay.
the whole like wheel of government. Instead of having 67 people that can say no and don't want to follow your lawful command, you just have a chain of command that goes from point to point, right? So I think you need way less people. You don't need this massive number. I think that is a fiction of the deep state. Not to mention, again, you save money. Then you need to do a whole bunch of things with personnel. For like instance, at FBI, you need to stock it with a director, deputy director, and the heads of the separate divisions. Same thing at CIA and DOD that are going to support. And the media, again, is distorting it already. Trump's going to install loyalists. Kash Patel's a Trump loyalist. What does that even mean? Mm-hmm. Like if the guy gives me a lawful chain of command authority, you want me to not execute it? That's unlawful if I violate it. He was the president. If he's the president again, the same thing, should apply. So then we need to decrease what I call government creep with personnel. The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and rapists and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
So a massive government reform.
Yeah. And you got to work with Congress to eliminate the billets. This is one of the things we did when I was deputy DNI. We got to DNI and I was like, okay, what do all these people do? We've got the CIA, so why do I have analysts doing the CIA's job here? Why do I have a floor of them? Like, give me a good answer. I don't know everything. I don't know a lot. But if you can give me an answer that satisfies their existence, I'm all in. Well, we just have our own people. Okay, well, now we don't. And we went to Congress and zeroed out a bunch of billets, and they hated us for it.
Why? Why would Congress hate you for that?
Not Congress, the public. Congress is like, great, you saved us money. You're the only agency that returned money this year because we didn't spend our entire budget. We were literally funding seats with no humans in them for years. And what the government creep that I was talking about is these agencies go to Congress every year. And again, this is why it's a thing of decades. I need 5 more seats here. I need 10 more seats here. Okay, you keep doing that. How's that going? Oh, we'll fill that seat next year. We're in the process of, interviewing people for that section. And that keeps, no one returns money. It's the biggest fiction in government that you can't return money. Every agency and department that I've ever worked for, when it comes to the fiscal end of the year, they're like, go on trips, go spend money. What? Just give it back to Congress. We can't do that.
Let's talk about FISA.
Oh, boy. I might have to go to the bar.
Well, it's just a short distance from the chair, so if you need that, let me know. Can you go, what is FISA, for those that don't know?
Just super simple, right? Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. And the FISA court, the FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
It's funny because the first word that comes into my mind is domestic. But
Right. And that's a whole nother deal with it. So there was a passage of legislation that its original purpose was, there's a lot of bad actors overseas, namely terrorists, who want to do Americans harm. We need a better way to find out who they are. And electronic surveillance, ELSUR as we call it, is a great way of doing it, through people's phones, through people's computers, through people's laptops, through people's internet cafe signals, whatever, right? But the American government didn't have an ability to just go and plug in here and get all that. So we created a law that allows us to go to a special court to say, if you, the target of the FISA, is one of two things: an agent of a foreign power or acting at the behest of an agent of a foreign power, you can be targeted under FISA. And the probable cause standard is the exact same as it was if we were trying to get a warrant on a bank robber. It's the same standard in terms of the level of evidence. But you go before this court and you're supposed to show all this information to say, look at the operation they're running. And if they're an American citizen, like Carter Page was during the Russiagate FISAs, you're supposed to do more to justify that surveillance because it's so intrusive on an American citizen. But once you get a FISA, and I use this all the time to manhunt terrorists around the world, once you get a FISA, you basically just hoover in all this intel, all this data. And on paper and in theory, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, we use the FISA process to stop bombings in America. You would think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. The problem is the people given the FISA authorities in the deep state at the leadership levels, they're the ones that abused it. They're the ones that broke the law and corrupted it. And they're the reason we have such a revolt in this country against FISA. You talk about domestic terrorism or domestic surveillance. These guys took that process during Russiagate and targeted an American citizen to get into a president's campaign of all American citizens. It's not only that, there's another application of FISA called 702. It doesn't matter all the logistics of it. It's just another vector into how we collect certain data on emails and email hops and phones of overseas people. We're not supposed to use it here in the United States of America. Chris Wray was caught last year illegally using 702 collection methods against Americans 274,000 times.
274,000 times.
It's not my number. It's in the report that they wrote. The FISA court wrote it. And then the FISA court, and there was this big fight about 702 reauthorization. I know it might not be appealing to your audience, but it was a big fight this year to say we want FISA reform. And FISA did need reform. We exposed it and we gave you a bunch of reforms during Russiagate, and it never got implemented. So because the budget of FISA was up this cycle, we demanded Congress fix it. And do you know what the majority in the House, where the Republicans did? They bent the knee. They reauthed it.
Why?
I don't know. Ask them. And they said, oh, no, we're just doing it for another year. We're just going to kick the can down the road. I'm like, okay, so the other year you're doing it for is an election year. We showed you how they abused FISA once already. And then now you know about Chris Wray and all these other FISA abuses. But you trust the director of the FBI, this guy Chris Wray, who went before you and said, no, don't worry. We fixed everything. We're good. And they gave him more spy powers? I can't answer that one, and I couldn't get on board with that legislative fix.
Did they use that to surveil you?
They used as far as I know. Remember, we're still in the process of suing them. I don't know that they used a FISA against me, but they used all the other grand jury and federal investigatory subpoenas and to surveil me.
And so how does that work? Do they just tap your phone, or they talk to Google and
Yeah, the
Facebook
mechanics of it,
and-
right. That's a great question. So the mechanics of it, the government doesn't own the private sector. They don't own Apple. They don't own Google. They don't own Verizon. They don't own Sprint, right? So they got to get cooperation from these agencies and from these, private companies. Look, it's just like if you were, we call it a T3, a Title III warrant. It's a wiretap. If you were in the mafia and you were a federal prosecutor hunting down the mob, you would go to a federal judge and say, I need to tap this guy's phone line. But that guy's phone line is owned by Verizon or Bell Pacific or whatever, right? So once you get the warrant, then you go to the company, and the company complies with a federal court order to give you the information.
Okay.
And then what the government does most of the time is they go to the company and say, you're not allowed to tell the target of the investigation that you're giving us as information. Hence the Google thing with me. Google was ordered not to tell them about me. But 5 years later, they could.
I got you something.
Oh,
You heard of that?
yeah, man. That's awesome.
The unplugged phone?
Yeah.
So there's no advertising ID from Facebook, Google,
I love it.
any of those other places.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome.
This
so
is great.
Hopefully that'll help you with the
Oh, I'm going to start using it right away.
good.
As long as I don't leave it right there.
Send me your new number. But
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's Eric Prince developed the phone and for situations like that, and so.
But that's the sad part, right?
Yeah.
Eric's a friend, one of the most creative minds I know. That he has to do that as an American.
Yeah.
That I have to write a book called Government Gangsters, that Steve Bannon has to make into a movie just to explain to America that the mob in government is worse than the mob that Whitey Bulger ran. That we have to explain there's a deep state. That we have to do that instead of having you, me, and all our friends go do the jobs they signed up for in 2024 America. That's the problem.
Did FISA come through the Patriot Act?
It came before the Patriot Act. It's been around since like the 70s. And the Patriot Act gave FISA bolted on a bunch more tools.
Okay.
Because technology advanced, cell phones advanced, computers advanced, Wi-Fi advanced. So they had to add that stuff in.
Would you like to see that go away?
Nah, see, I'm in the minority here. No.
I mean, it's got to be tough, right? I mean, the border's been wide open for who knows how long. Who knows? I mean, who knows how many terrorists have run through, cartel members have
Well,
run
if we
through.
believe the FBI director, only 24.
Yeah, right. The FBI director, the FBI in general. I mean,
DHS, same thing. 24.
they're literally saying only 24.
So the Mayorkas and Ray testified late last year or early this year. I can't remember, to Congress for an update. They said 24 known foreign terrorists have come into America and we lost them. And I was like, wait a second, there's multiple problems with this statement. Just 24? And you lost them? Like, where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
Why weren't you using the FISA process on these guys? Everybody's wired up these days, okay? You know this better than anyone. Al-Qa'ida, ISIS, all these guys, they monopolized the cell phone empire and figured out how to use it. So why don't you set your intelligence apparatus to prioritize this instead of DEI and white rage? This is why this shit's happening. But just think of what you guys, you know this. The terrorists are going to wait. They're not going to do it tomorrow or next week. They'll wait like 5 years, whenever they want, the opportune time. But it's happening now. And as bad as that is, I still think we need FISA to manhunt those people down. We just need people using it lawfully. And it needs major, major reform. Tons.
And I hate to say it, but I don't disagree with you. I mean, especially with all the terrorism that's come through the border. I mean, we won't know. And we're having this conversation, at breakfast about when they might hit. And I think we maybe have a difference of opinion on that. stuff or different strategies, which I'd love to go into, but how do you get rid of it with the amount of cartel and terrorists and members of the Chinese state?
You raise a whole new. We're not just using FISA on terrorists. It's a huge Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It is a massive intelligence collection tool, right? How do we get the CCP? What about the SVR? What about whatever intel service in wherever that's against America? If it goes away, what are we going to do?
And if it doesn't go away, then they'll just continue to spy on
Catch-22
Americans unlawfully. What do you think some of the biggest threats outside of the country are?
CCP, Russia, and Al-Qaeda.
Why Al-Qaeda?
Because they're having a party in Afghanistan. Because of the disastrous withdrawal.
Yeah.
I ran the withdrawal in Afghanistan when I became chief of staff with the SecDef. We didn't have a timeline. We didn't say we got to be out by this date. We had the diplomatic leaders doing the diplomatic thing. We were doing the DOD military intel thing. We lost 0 Americans during our withdrawal. We handed that withdrawal off to the Biden administration because President Trump ordered us to implement the biggest DOD transition in U.S. history. And we did, the largest DOD transition, which I literally led. And I said, call it whatever you want. The Biden saving Afghanistan for the world thing, whatever. The new incoming SecDef, the chief of staff, and all the other people were like, F you, go away, we're going to do it our way. And look what happened.
Yeah.
So because we left all that weaponry there, because our withdrawal was such a disaster, Afghanistan is the perfect example of not only our biggest failed mission set, but of our 3 adversaries. I got to add a 4th, Iran. Our 3 adversaries coming together. So Al-Qaeda's got weaponry. Russia and China went in there to mine the minerals and give them money. So now they're all just hanging out, making money, doing stuff. And that's the CCP in Russia. Hence, they're combining forces there. But Russia and the CCP are doing so much more adversarial intelligence collections against us, against our electric grids and other things. But the biggest holistic CT threat is Iran.
You just mentioned that China and Russia are in Afghanistan mining the minerals. Do you want to elaborate on what minerals they're mining?
Not the minerals expert, actually.
Lithium, correct?
Lithium and cobalt, I thought it was. Was it just one?
Why would they be mining lithium?
Yeah. Why? Because they want to give Elon Musk a lot of electric batteries.
So where I'm going with this is, yes, I'm aware of that as well. They're mining a ton of lithium. Yeah. We have this big green initiative in the country. We want to go green, but we don't want to produce any of our own. They sell it as self-sufficiency, correct?
Yeah.
Self-sufficient energy. But it's not self-sufficient energy because we're getting all the batteries, all the solar panels, all the wind turbines, pretty much everything it takes to have green energy from China. They're mining the minerals that they need to do that from Afghanistan, which we turned over and gave to them. So we spoke a little bit about the power grid and how vulnerable it is at breakfast. So, I want to dive into that, but just kicking it off when it comes to the power grid, we're not going to be self-sufficient and we're going to be extremely vulnerable because literally all of the materials that we use for the new power grid come from China.
Yeah, 100%. Look, it's the modern day blood diamond, lithium and cobalt. Call it what it is. If you could celebrate it over here as some sort of green energy, amazing economic, environmental, home run. But like you said, how are you get it out of Afghanistan? You think these camps and mines these people run are above board? The people in there working them are getting paid good wages? What about the folks in CAR in Central African Republic and Congo doing the same thing? How's their life? It's the modern day blood diamond. And the ironic thing of it all is if you ran a Ford pickup truck for 20 years, it does less damage to the environment than the creation and and removal at the end of a car cycle's life of an electric battery. That's the reality of the economics on an environmental scale. But like you said, we're the fools. We're buying it from the CCP. We're buying it from these places in Central Africa. We're buying it from people who have all ties to Al-Qa'ida and whatever version of, offshoot they have. And while the CCP is making a ton of money, we're getting weaker. We're just getting bamboozled by our adversary who's making money off this entire process, and the people around them that are participating are growing in strength. And I think the best example, to pull it out of the lithium space a little bit, but bring it back on what I should have said in the top of the cycle, is Iran is, in my opinion, the biggest kinetic threat. And they're doing the same thing, except they're not mining for lithium. We're just giving them money. What do I mean by that? Joe Biden literally unfroze $7 billion that we had seized from the Iranian government like 25 years ago and gave it back to them, to the mullahs in Iran. He literally turned the key and said, okay, you guys can have this money back. We're going to trust you, Iran, not to create a nuclear weapon, not to fund the IRGC, not to kill Americans, not to launch another war in Israel via Hamas, Hezbollah. And you guys just report to us how the nuke stuff is going, because remember, these are the guys that want it back in the JCPOA, Obama's nuclear deal. How's that looking today? The Secretary of State for Joe Biden just said he can't tell you how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon, but he thinks they're pretty close. You let them do that. They're buying their weaponry and stuff from China, Russia, Venezuela, oil. And now they're exporting their crude overseas, and people are buying that. Now they have access to the international banking system, which we froze off. I mean, Trump's sanctions program on Iran, just for example, was dominating. It was suffocating. And there was a reason for that, because they would not play ball on terms of shutting down their nuclear program. And now they have nuclear fissile material enough to sustain a bomb. And the Biden administration has given them free rein. So now the biggest threat kinetically is armed with money and weaponry, and they're combining forces with Russia and the CCP, who would all probably normally be like battling against each other a little bit, but they've basically sidelined that to say, we have the same enemy, the USA. We need your intel, we need your weaponry, we need your finances, and we'll help you, Iran, in the process because you hate America. And you'll do the most outward-leaning kinetic operations, to wit, the October 7th invasion of Israel.
How vulnerable is our power grid?
It's probably the most vulnerable thing we have. And people just don't pay attention to it because, I don't know if because it's not sexy or cool to talk about or cool to work on, but our power grids are like 60, 70 years old.
It's going to be cool when the lights don't go out.
And people, exactly. And people are like, no, that just happens in that movie Die Hard or something, Die Hard 4, whatever it was. I'm like, no, I mean, it's not that hard to shut off a power grid through a cyber attack. And once you get it down, to get it back online, I mean, just think of it. I don't want to get into the numbers. There's not a lot of these things that control the electricity supply to the country. And for people who don't know what a power grid is, it's literally just like a switch that says, you got electricity over here, we're going to take it in and give it to you over there, right? And it's just a relay system. And we haven't upgraded those in forever. And I'm not talking just physical infrastructure. I'm talking, how do we protect it from cyber attacks from the CCP, from Russia and Iran and other bad actors. And we don't really have a focus here because that's an intel directive. And to pull back on it, the NIPIF, the National Intelligence Priorities Framework, is a president's rack and stack of what they want the intel community to focus on. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4. For us in the Trump administration, it was terrorism, hostages, the never-ending wars, Iran, the CCP, Russia, boom, tier 1. And the DNI with the president changes that based on what he wants. And then the intel community says, okay, CIA, you got, and I'm making up numbers, you got 5,000 people on this. This is your tier 1 for 5,000 people. Go. Same thing, NSA, DOD, FBI, given their specific lines of effort. The NIPIF now, it reads like a children's playbook. Tier 1, DEI, Tier 1, diversity, equity, and inclusion for every agency and department. Tier 1, LGBTQ stuff. Tier 1, white rage. And the people doing the work can't collect the intel that you need to secure this nation against things like electric grids because they're not allowed to look there.
How vulnerable is it to outside attacks?
Big. It's big because once they hit it, we can't fix it fast. Look, we just saw Paris during the Olympics just got blacked out. Ain't a coincidence after the opening ceremonies. And I think President Trump has talked about this. You need to overhaul the infrastructure around these systems to safeguard us from what I view as one of the easier threats our adversaries can deploy against America. And it's also, those are harder to trace too. So that's the other thing. The sourcing would be much harder on that than, say, a kinetic operation like a 9/11 style attack.
I mean, is there any contingency plans up at the top on if that were to happen?
So there's this thing called COOP-COG capabilities, like continuity of government, and everybody's heard about locations around America. I can't really talk about, but there's a continuity plan for government to keep going and for enough personnel to be around to make sure we can do all those things and supposedly defend the nation and have the commander-in-chief and his cabinet secure and do all that. But there's no contingency plan to say, if you wipe out the electricity west of the Mississippi, how are we going to turn it on? It doesn't exist.
I mean, that's great that government's still going to function, but...
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is if the grid goes down, we'll eventually just kill ourselves out of desperation. There will be no food, there'll be no water, there'll be no medical, there'll be no communication, there'll be no nothing.
I guess it'll be like one of those end of the world shows, I
mean, did they talk about this up there? At that level? Do they even understand what will happen if the grid goes down
I know we did when we were in. I know we did. And again, this is a type of lift that you're not fixing overnight. You got to get Congress's buy-in to budget this, to allow the agencies and department to go in and make this a priority, to allow companies to come in and rebuild the infrastructure and fix it. Same with our nuclear programs and our nuclear arsenal. It's the same deal.
So we're fucked.
I think we have an ability. That's why I think this election is so important, not just for everything we've talked about to this point, but in terms of national security and defense, which is sort of my wheelhouse. We have an opportunity to come in and reprioritize all the things that you and I have just been talking about so that the American people are safeguarded, because they've been neglected for too long, because these are not been priorities of the current administration and some of the previous administrations.
How likely is that method of attack, do you think, from Russia, Iran, Korea, China?
Something's going to happen, if not already. Here's the other thing. The intel community right now is playing catch up on half these attacks because, again, it wasn't a priority to preemptively detect them and thwart the attack. And so not only playing catch up, not only is it a deprioritization of intelligence collection and enforcement, you also don't have a will in D.C. to fix and upgrade any of this stuff. So I've always said they're going to come at us in some fashion during this election cycle. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like or if we're going to know right away.
What do you think about what I was telling you this morning about the pristine opportunity to hit us? When I was talking about, I don't think, I wasn't saying I don't, it's not a prediction, it's what I would do. And it seems to me we would be, let's say Trump gets in, day one of his presidency would be the weakest possible point that they could hit us.
Yeah.
Correct? Because from that point forward,
Yeah.
the way I think, the country will begin to strengthen. So it would be at the weakest point on day one of his presidency. And so if I was them, I would wait until he is elected and hit on day one. Whereas if they don't hit and Kamala or whoever they decide to stick in there, who knows, right? Then we'll see 4 more years of weakening, which will enhance the probability of them coming out on top.
Look, I think that analysis is pretty spot on in terms of timeliness for our adversaries to decide on when's the most opportune time for them to strike. I think there's one other factor that we talked about at breakfast that may alter that a little bit, which is there's so much bad stuff going on right now that our adversaries have collectively kicked off against us, whether it's the border, whether it's the never-ending war in Ukraine, whether it's the war in Israel, whether it's the CCP and what they're doing or going to do in Taiwan, whatever's going on in Africa, whether it's Afghanistan and its resurgence of Al-Qa'ida. There's so many things going on that I think an adversary that traditionally might have waited to that opportune day might come in the interim and say, these guys have no idea how to defend what we can put out there right now. So maybe they go now. Maybe they go in the interim in the next 100 and whatever it is, 4 days or something like that. But they've already done 3 things that nobody said would ever happen. Started 2 new world wars in Ukraine and Israel, and allowed China and the CCP to flex their muscles on Taiwan. Everybody's like, that's never going to happen. Well, it didn't happen under Trump, but it all happened now. And we haven't even talked about DPRK, their new program, their rockets. That guy has been having a party this entire time. Or Venezuela, right? People forget about how bad some of these regimes are for global stability when they're not in the news every day. And I think that's advantageous for their leadership, and they see it. And they're like, all right, well, let's figure this out. Because at the end of the day, all they care about is themselves.
How vulnerable are we to cyber threats?
Big time.
What are the other vulnerabilities?
From our adversaries specifically?
Yes.
We talked about everything coming in from the border, huge collective threat that's just going to keep growing and metastasizing. And that includes a lot more of the physical stuff, right? The crime, the fentanyl, the narco trafficking, the sex smuggling, that kind of stuff. The cyber stuff is in a different lane, but could expose us just as much, if not worse. And I think we're very, very, very vulnerable to that. Just look at what CrowdStrike did, shut down. That's an American company run by James Comey's buddy.
Is it really?
Yeah. James Comey's former number 2 is Sean Henry, the COO, or whatever it is. And if this company can get as big as it did, mind you, this is the same company, CrowdStrike, that the FBI, when Donald Trump was getting to the presidency and James Comey was the director, remember the whole DNC hack from Russia, another disinformation campaign? They said the Russians hacked the DNC to try to rig the election for Donald Trump. Comey gave the servers from the DNC to CrowdStrike to exploit. Have you ever heard of a time that the FBI surrendered its investigation to a private entity and didn't conduct its own surveillance and exploitation of that data? I interrogated Sean Henry and 65 other people under oath during Russiagate, and we were unable to declassify his testimony for years. So the narrative of the DNC was attacked by Russia was out there. What did Sean Henry say? Now it's declassified? We didn't find any evidence to support that.
Wow.
So and you got to stitch these things together. So when you're talking about vulnerabilities at the cyber level, who knows what other traditional areas of expertise that the government has that they've outsourced, right? What do they give Facebook? What do they give Google? What do they give Twitter? I mean, we haven't even talked about censorship, and we know that is just a dominant plague in modern day media.
Yeah.
And we're paying them to do it.
Yeah.
So you got to go out there and find, hopefully if Trump wins, all of this is another thing. Find all these contracts that we've given to all these companies and pull them. Why are you making money off of your corrupt activities because your friends from government then went to work at Twitter and then you got in bed with them and said, oh, we're going to have an election integrity task force?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kash, this interview could go on for hours, but we got about 5 minutes before you got to catch your flight. So I just want to ask you, you're close to Trump, and if he does get in there and win the presidency, what do you think we can expect improvement-wise in the next 4 years?
I think my opinion is you almost don't need to hear from me. I don't know another candidate that's put his agenda out there more in detailed, delineated fashion than Trump. His Agenda 47, his RNC platform, it's there in black and white. And it's in super detail about what he's going to prioritize. National security, defense, law enforcement, intelligence, the border, the never-ending wars, American hostages, economy, infrastructure, cyber, and electric. I mean, it's all out there. So I think, people always talk about what's he going to do on day one. Obviously illegal immigrants and all that. Hopefully he does it all right away, because I think that's the urgency that we need it. It'll take time to implement, but hopefully he comes in and says, okay, here's my agenda. And I think that's what most presidents do. They're like, here's my agenda, go. You go do what you do at Ag. You go do what you do at DOD. You go do what you do at FBI. We're going to do what we do at the White House. And everybody's going 24/7. I think it'd be a pretty quick fix for a lot of it. Some of it's going to take time. But I do think he'll end the forever wars super fast. I do think he'll shut down the border super fast. I do think he'll expel immigrants super fast. And I do think that will give the economy a big boost as a collateral result.
That would be great to see. If you had 3 recommendations for the show, who would they be?
To put on?
To put on.
Oh, man. Well, we talked about the whistleblowers. I think you got to have them on. You're going to have a blast.
Whistleblowers?
Yeah, I think collectively you have those guys on. And I know them personally, so I might be a little biased. That'll be fun. 2, well, I know the one guy you should definitely have on, Trump.
Well,
you're
the guy that
maybe he's 2 and 3.
You're the guy that can get that done. We've hit him from every angle I can possibly think of and have not had much luck. So
well,
if
we'll
you
get that. We'll put that in motion. And maybe Don Jr. I think that would be a fun one too. But I think it's I appreciate what you do, because I don't know that people know how much time and effort goes into doing what you do. It's a freaking massive lift. Massive lift. And the reach you have. I know you see it, but I see it when I'm out there traveling every other day for the job. And it's pretty widespread, man. I mean, you're out there. So I'm going to promise you that I will try my best to get Trump and you to sit down and have a chat in the near future.
Well, I would love that. And
I need everybody to make Government Gangsters the #1 film in America. Sorry, I had to put that selfish plug in there.
No sweat. Your book, your movie will all be linked in below, and your foundation.
Thanks.
Cash, I know you got to run. I just want to say thank you for coming in. It means the world to me, and I hope to have you on again.
I'd love to do that. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, man.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.